Window process. Begin the window transformation by removing all the caulking surrounding the window. Paint will not stick to silicone caulking and very likely to crack if you paint over other types of caulking. There are a few ways to remove caulking depending on how old and/or hard it has become. When caulking is relatively new and still gummy, you'll be able to pull it off. When it is old and hard, you'll have to use an oscillating tool to cut it off. This will also be the case for very adhesive caulkings even if they are still gummy. Now you can begin masking by pre-taping the window paint to make sure you're taping as close to the edges as possible. Use the 3M plastic sheet roll with applicator gun to cover the glass. Roll down and tape the edges to cover and protect the whole window pane. We do this before prepping the surface to be painted in order to avoid unnecessarily damaging the glass with any of our chemical cleaners. Pre-tape the surface around the window frame using the appropriate tape depending on the surface. Use masking paper to create a barrier around the window for possible overspray. Now we're ready to prep the surface for the paint. Apply deglosser onto your low-lint, solvent-tolerant rags liberally and apply to the window. Make sure to always wipe in a swiping motion and add more deglosser as needed. Equally important to use a clean side of your rag in order to avoid simply spreading dirt around. The purpose of this step is to degloss the surface, but also to remove all dirt and contaminants from the surface. Once the chemical clean has been completed, you'll need to scuff the surface to dislodge any additional dirt that may need to be mechanically removed and ensure that the surface is properly deglossed. Paint will have a hard time sticking to any glossy and/or contaminated surfaces. Proper cleaning and deglossing requires both a chemical and mechanical component. Very important to ensure corners and windowsills are properly cleaned, as these are normally the dirtiest and most likely to cause paint failures. For vinyl windows, you want to make sure to scuff, not scratch the windows, which could break down the fibers of the vinyl. Use the blower from your HVLP machine to remove any dust resulting from the mechanical clean, and a water-based compatible tack cloth to clean up any remaining particles. In the case of aluminum windows, you will likely have much more dust as you are breaking down the factory paint. You are almost ready to paint. Stir the door and window paint. Never shake it, as this will create air bubbles that could affect the finish. Add the catalyst using a 10-to-1 ratio. Adjust paint for weather as needed using either accelerator or retarder. Fill the spray equipment with the paint using a filter. Test spray pattern before painting the window. You are now ready for the last step before painting. Using an acetone-resistant sprayer, liberally spray acetone onto your low-lint, solvent-tolerant rag and apply to the window in a swiping motion. We do this for a few reasons. A. To remove any remaining dirt particles and/or contaminants that may still be on the surface. B. To evaporate any remaining solvents left by the deglosser. It can take up to 30 minutes for all those solvents to evaporate from the surface and must have done so before you paint. In the case of vinyl windows, to open up the pores and soften the vinyl in order to better accept the coating and fuse together with the vinyl. However, the acetone will soften the vinyl and expose its pores only for a very short time. If you are painting vinyl windows, it is vital to acetone immediately before painting. Adjust your equipment for a tack coat. Test your pattern. Wipe window with acetone and apply a tack coat to the entire window. This is what a tack coat should look like. Adjust your equipment to spray all the corners and edges. Test your pattern and fill in all edges and corners. This is what filled in edges and corners should look like. Adjust your spray equipment for the final coat. You shouldn't need to wait more than 30 seconds if you've applied the right thickness of paint. It is important to spray the final coat over the tack coat while it is still tacky and not dry. This is why it is called a tack coat. Waiting too long could potentially cause intercoat adhesion issues, as the film will have fully cross-linked. The purpose of the tack coat is to prevent sagging and serves as a foundational coat for your top coat, but it must fuse and cross-link together with the top coat. This cannot happen if it has already begun the cross-linking process, and is why spraying in direct sunlight is likely to cause adhesion issues. The film will sometimes dry so fast that it doesn't even have the time to fuse with the surface, let alone remain tacky for an additional coat. During ideal conditions, of course, proceed to spray the top coat so that it entirely covers the surface. This should be between 3 and 4 mils wet, but you'll be able to tell visually if the surface is covered with a new color. If the paint is applied too thin, you will get a rough finish, and if it is applied too thick, you will get sagging. It is important to adjust your equipment and use proper spraying techniques. Be mindful of distance from the surface as well as angle. This is what a proper final wet coat should look like. If an additional coat is required because the product is applied too thin, make sure not to wait too long or you will need to scuff the surface before painting. If the paint is no longer tacky, you should scuff to avoid any adhesion issues. Marvel at that new, beautiful factory finish. This is what the final coat should look like a brand new window. Now you're ready to untape. Make sure to use a utility knife to cut any paint film that may have bridged between your glass masking and the painted surface. Peel off the tape at an angle. Use a window scraper to ensure a perfect edge. Remove masking around the window frame. Prepare your caulking tube. Ensure that the paint is dry to the touch and apply caulking. Smooth any edges as needed. Get ready for that huge smile on your customer's face.